What if the Warden of the North had shaped his destiny with his own hands, rather than laying his head upon a block? Imagine the cold hammer of Winterfell's forges echoing through halls, where kings once sat unchallenged. The frozen steel of the frozen North would glint in torchlight as Ned envisions a new seat of power, one he builds, one he commands. And with that throne made of Winter's own bones, the Seven Kingdoms would tremble beneath the roar of House Stark. At Winterfell, the chill never truly left. Snow piled against the ramparts, the howls of wind through the broken battlements, reminding the Stark children that summer's promise was always fleeting. Ned stood at the forge in the crypt's shadow, hammer in hand, his breath in white clouds. The old weirwood above seemed to watch, its leaves still hung heavy with frost. He knew the cost of honor. He knew the betrayals at King's Landing. He knew the blade that landed before Joffrey's laughter. But here he made a different choice. He would not be played. He would not die waiting. The decision was made in silence. The Iron Throne, that jagged seat of power forged in dragonfire, would be remade from metal born of the North's deepest winter. 3 days later, he summoned his most trusted men, the blacksmiths of House Umber, the artisans of House Karstark, veterans who had seen the Ironborn of Ironborn and the steel of Lannister gold. They worked in secret beneath Winterfell's kitchens, the great hall quiet and abandoned. Outside, Bran and Rickon ran errands. Sansa and Arya learned war and needle alike. But in that hidden chamber, Ned's voice was low and firm. "The old throne is a symbol of dragon lords and fire," he said, "but the North remembers stone and steel. If the realm is to stand under our rule, let it rest on something true." The men took up bellows, the metal glowed, and the hammer struck rhythm. Boom, spark, boom. Each strike rang through his soul, each spark a promise of change. As the first piece of the new throne took shape, a curved back of frosted steel, prongs sharp like the broken glass of the godswood, Ned's mind floated to the consequences. The South would jeer that Winterfell's lord dared seat himself above all. The Lannisters, the Tyrells, the Greyjoys, they would not bend easily. But if he gave them no throne to serve, if he offered them instead a seat under his rule, he removed their power to challenge. Power changed shape, yes, but here it was shaped by his hand. He pictured the banners of the North clicking in the wind, the direwolves howling at dusk, and the men in the South shifting uneasily upon their cushions. Meanwhile, in King's Landing the court moved as it always did. Rumors whispered of an odd shipment of steel from the North. The gold cloaks noticed the wagons from Winterfell passing the city gates, but assumed it was for a new castle wall or mining operation. Their blindness sealed the deal. Ned's allies in the small councils had begun to shift, some quietly, some with open ambition. The hand of the king and the small folk alike could sense a new player rising. The mountain of honor that Ned had carried through the tourneys now took another form, the ambition to sit on a throne he built himself. The realm did not know it yet, but the game had changed, deep into the night. As the forging lit the hidden chamber, Ned recalled the words of his father. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. He had swung many swords. He had carried many sentences. But a throne made not of inherited fire, but of winter's steel. This was his sentence to the realm, change or be shattered. He placed the first cold spike into place and felt the vibration run up his arm. The North would not simply follow. The North would lead, or it would burn. Sansa had asked earlier that evening, "Father, why do you spend so long below the hall when dinner is ready?" He had offered a smile, but the steel made his fingers ache. "Because," he said quietly, "I cannot wait for someone else to give us our place." Sansa looked away, uncertain, and Arya watched from the stairs' shadow. Ned knew his children would suffer the consequences long before the realm accepted them. The forge's heat did not soften the cold he felt inside. Something had to change. Something had to shift the balance. This throne was the catalyst. By the time the finishing weld was done, the piece stood in the dim torchlight, a throne of cold steel and winter's memory. The prongs rose like shards of ice, the seat deep and unforgiving. Ned stepped back, his cloak heavy with snow and sweat. He surveyed the chamber. The smiths wiped their brows. "Tonight," he said, "we burn the old oath. Tomorrow we forge the new one." The loyalty of houses would be pledged not to gold or fire, but to the North's iron will. The realm would awaken to a new reality. The next morning, as the sun rose pale and frosted over Winterfell's towers, Ned summoned the bannermen of the north. In the great hall they gathered. House Mormont, House Umber, House Karstark, House Glover. Their eyes flickered to the sealed doors of the forge beneath the hall. Ned stood before them, the snow melting off his cloak. He addressed them firmly. "We have made a new seat of power. We do not sit because we were given grace. We sit because we earned it. We will take no longer the role of defenders alone. We will be authors of the realm's fate." A murmur spread. Some men shifted uncomfortably. Others clenched their fists in cold excitement. The north had risen. The ripple reached King's Landing before the sun set. The courtiers whispered of that Stark Lord building something strange. The Lannister children laughed behind their fans, but the gold looked thinner now. The Tyrells questioned their flowers. The Ironborn looked to their sea and wondered how steel forged in snow compared to salt and spray. Political realignment began before any word of war. Ned's decision had changed the game board. He wasn't just a piece anymore. He was the board, and yet within his heart a question gnawed. What would this cost? He had sworn to protect his family. He had sworn to serve the king. He had sworn many things. But now he must swear a new oath to power, to steel, to change. The children of Winterfell would follow him, or they'd see him fall. The Seven Kingdoms would recognize his throne, or they would bend and break under it. In the chill of dawn, the hammer struck again, not on steel but on conscience. A Lord of Honor building a throne of ambition. Building a throne of ambition. The raven reached Dragonstone before it reached Casterly Rock. Daenerys Targaryen held the parchment in shaking fingers, the sea wind lashing her silver hair against her cheeks. The words were simple, but they cracked the old world open like an egg. A new throne has been forged in Winterfell. The North no longer kneels, neither shall it beg. At her side, Drogon stirred restlessly. The fire inside her matched the cold steel in Ned Stark's message. "I thinks he can take what belongs to fire," she whispered. "Let's see how well winter burns." In King's Landing, Tyrion Lannister read the same words in silence, sipping wine that suddenly tasted like blood. The throne room, empty since the boy king's passing, now loomed over him like a forgotten god. He'd seen what happened when men chased power. He'd seen his sister tear kingdoms apart for less. And now a Stark wanted to be king, not with a claim but with a hammer. "Oh, Ned," Tyrion muttered, "you always were too quiet to be trusted." Littlefinger, meanwhile, smiled. Chaos had always been his ladder. But now chaos had teeth. The North's declaration shook the realm's foundations. Whispers grew like mold, that Ned Stark had risen from his dishonored grave to challenge not just the Iron Throne but the very idea of it. Some called him a madman, others a savior. Goldcloaks spat when they said his name. But in the shadows, a few noble houses began to wonder. What if the North wasn't mad? What if it was, right? Winterfell swelled with movement. Men trained twice as hard. The smiths' fires never dimmed. Ned stood among them not as lord, but as something new. They called him the Frost King in whispers. Jon Snow watched from a distance, his heart full of questions. "You want to sit on that thing?" he asked one evening, nodding toward the frozen monstrosity of steel and snow and sharp northern spikes. Ned didn't smile. "I don't want to. I have to. But the realm has already bled for a southern throne. This one we bled to make ourselves." Jon stared at it, its shadow stretching across the floor like a wolf ready to pounce. "And if they march against you?" "Then we remind them. Winter doesn't ask for permission." Arya returned from the Riverlands 2 nights later, blade at her hip, scars on her knuckles. She said little. She always did. But when she touched the new throne, her fingers trembled. "It's cold," she whispered. Ned said nothing. They both knew that some thrones were built not to comfort, but to command. Word spread faster than wildfire. At Highgarden, the Tyrells debated whether the North's declaration was a bluff or the start of a rebellion. At Sunspear, the Martells sharpened their blades, old grudges heating under desert suns. At the Twins, Walder Frey cursed every Stark who had ever drawn breath. But in the Vale, something unexpected stirred. Lisa Arryn, lonely and paranoid, held her son close. But her master whispered logic in her ear. "The North remembers," he said, "and the Vale always owed Winterfell a debt." Robin Arryn, wide-eyed and foolish, clutched his falcon and muttered, "Uncle Ned could be king?" Of the whole realm? And slowly the Eyrie tilted north. Not all were so easily swayed. Cersei Lannister crushed the raven's message in her fist. "He dares," she hissed. Jaime watched her from the corner, golden hand tapping the hilt of his blade. "He's not wrong," Jaime muttered. Cersei turned like a snake. "What?" He saw rot in the south. "So he built something better. It's what a real king might do." Her slap echoed through the chamber. "We were born for this throne," she spat. "Not him. Not the wolf." But deep inside even Cersei felt it. Fear. Meanwhile, at the wall, the Night's Watch prepared for something darker. Not all the whispers were of rebellion and crowns. Some spoke of things stirring in the far north, creatures that did not kneel, did not burn, and did not care for politics. Maester Aemon read Ned's proclamation with shaking hands. "He's right," he whispered. "But he's late." Jon Snow stood beside him, uncertain. The air was colder now. Even Ghost growled at the northern wind. Back in Winterfell, Ned walked through the crypts alone. He paused before his sister's tomb, the stone still wet with frost. "I built it for them, Lyanna," he whispered. "So no child would be stolen for the price of a throne again." He touched the hilt of his sword. He felt the cold seep into his bones. "I built it for Jon, for the North, for everyone who was told they were nothing." Upstairs, the frozen throne sat alone in the hall. No banners above it. No torches flanking it. Just cold metal waiting. By nightfall, 3 more ravens had arrived. One bore the seal of House Tarly, neutral but watching. One bore the seal of House Baratheon, scrawled with insult. And the last. Unmarked, inside a single note. "You build with ice, but fire is coming. From across the sea." Ned read it once, then burned it. Arya watched the flame flicker. So what now? "Now," Ned said, "we see who bends, and who breaks." The next morning, Winterfell's gates opened wide. Riders galloped south bearing a new sigil. The dire wolf of Stark, crowned with frost, its eyes 2 burning coals. Beneath it the words, "We do not kneel, the war hadn't started yet." But everyone felt it. Something ancient had woken, not in fire, not in blood, but in the cold silence of winter-made steel, and it would not sleep again. And it would not sleep again. Ravens didn't fly fast enough to carry the storm that was coming. In the Red Keep, the small council gathered in a fury of hushed voices and splintered loyalties. Varys sat motionless as Pycelle sputtered, "A throne? He forged a throne? In the north?" Mace Tyrell demanded immediate retaliation. "It's treason. It must be crushed." But Tyrion leaned forward, tapping his goblet, eyes sharp and calculating. "Or it's an opportunity." "What opportunity?" Cersei hissed, arms crossed. "A Stark rebellion?" Tyrion smirked. "A rebellion? Or a replacement?" Silence fell, then came laughter from the shadows. "You'd trade the Iron Throne for a seat carved from snow and scrap?" Cersei snapped, but Littlefinger's smile was cold. "People don't follow thrones. They follow momentum. That was exactly what Ned Stark now had. Every house, every lord, every sellsword was suddenly watching the north. And not just watching, deciding. Who would they follow when fire and frost collided? In the Riverlands, House Tully remained quiet. Edmure hesitated, but the Blackfish didn't. He sent riders to Winterfell by nightfall. "He's not just my nephew," he growled. "He's the only one with enough honor left to lead." In Dorne, the Sand Snakes whispered vengeance. "A northern king may not care for the wheel," Nymeria said. "Let him break it." And in the Reach, the Tyrells plotted more carefully. Margaery watched her grandmother as Olenna scowled. "If fire fails us," she muttered, "then perhaps it's time we tested ice." Meanwhile, at Winterfell, a line of houses arrived to pledge their swords, not to the Iron Throne, but to Ned's frozen one. The Glovers came first, followed by the Reeds, then the Mormonts. Lady Lyanna Mormont stood before Ned without flinching. "The South never gave us a queen, or a king. You gave us steel. The Bear Island stands with Winterfell." Jon watched from the battlements. He still hadn't taken the knee. He still hadn't asked what this meant for him. That night he sat with Arya by the Godswood. "Do you think Father's gone too far?" he asked. Arya didn't blink. "I think the world finally sees him. He's not a king." Arya tilted her head. "Neither is anyone else." "Not really." Back inside, Ned pored over maps, ravens, and numbers. He hadn't wanted this. But now it was his. And more than just the north was shifting. A ship landed in White Harbor under cover of fog. On board, Davos Seaworth. "The Dragon Queen wants to talk," he told Ned, frost in his beard. Ned didn't move. She sends a smuggler? She sends a message. She knows you built a throne. She wants to know if you'll burn for it, or if you'll talk before the dragons do. The room chilled. Let her come, Ned said finally. Let her see what we made. But that wasn't the only arrival. 2 days later, a rider in grey furs arrived with a scroll sealed in wax as black as pitch. It bore no sigil, just a name. Bran. The message was short, but it stopped Ned's heart. The Night King stirs. The wall weakens. The long night comes again. Thrones are nothing in the dark. The air seemed colder. Outside, the snow hadn't stopped for days. And far beyond the wall, in the frostbitten wastes of death and legend, something moved. The dead. They were walking again, and this time, they weren't walking south for the throne. They were walking for the world. In Dragonstone, Daenerys read Bran's message too. She crushed it in her fist. I don't care if the North sits on a throne of ice or fire, she snarled. The dead don't kneel. Tyrion stood at her side, fingers steepled. Then we make them kneel. So we go north? We go to Winterfell. Drogon roared as her feet hit the deck. Tell the Stark to clear space beside his throne, she said. I don't intend to kneel either. And so it began. Fire, ice, life, death. The old world cracked like thin ice. The wall groaned. The dead marched. And in Winterfell, Ned Stark stared into the snow, whispering one truth he now knew too well. You can forge a throne, but it cannot stop what's coming. But it cannot stop what's coming. Dawn broke in Winterfell, but the sky remained dark. Clouds hung low like a lid over the world, smothering light. The banners of House Stark barely stirred, soaked and heavy with snow. On the ramparts, Jon Snow stood still as stone, eyes locked on the eastern horizon. Then just a flicker, a shadow against the grey. Then 2 more. Black wings, red flame. The dragons had come. Ned stood in the great hall, his throne of frozen steel behind him, its cruel angles catching the torchlight like jagged teeth. The room was silent. No guards flanked him. Only the North was present, men who owed him not coin or glory but loyalty born of frost and war. The heavy doors creaked open. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen entered with the wind. Dressed in black, silver hair unbound, her eyes scanned the hall like fire seeking fuel. Tyrion trailed behind her, quiet, calculating. Davos remained by the door, one hand on his blade. Ned stepped forward. You brought your dragons. She smiled, tight. You built a throne. They circled each other with words instead of swords. You burned cities, Ned said. You serve a grave. You believe fire makes kings, and you believe cold makes them better? No, Ned said simply. I believe the realm deserves something different. Tyrion stepped between them, palms raised. Before we test which throne is stronger, fire or ice, perhaps we talk about the thing that doesn't care which one we sit on. He placed a piece of parchment on the table. Bran's message, the room chilled. Do you believe him? Daenerys asked. I watched one die and rise again, Jon answered, stepping forward. I fought them. They don't stop. They don't feel. Can't they're coming? She looked at him, eyes narrowing. You, she said. You're the bastard. Jon Snow, he said. No, Bran's voice whispered from the shadows. All eyes turned. Bran Stark, gaunt and strange, was wheeled into the hall by Meera Reed. His voice was low, flat, ancient. He is the blood of ice and fire, a pause thicker than winter. Ned's jaw tensed. Enough. Bran looked up, pale eyes distant. You forged a throne, father. But you must now forge a king. Daenerys' expression cracked like old stone. What is he saying? Bran's words dropped like snowfall. Jon is Rhaegar Targaryen's son, born of Lyanna Stark, legitimate, named Aegon. Ned stepped forward. That secret died with me. It lived in me, Bran said. And now it lives in fire. Daenerys stared at Jon, then at Ned. Everything shifted. The girl who had crossed oceans, suffered slavery, loss, betrayal, everything, now saw her throne not threatened by enemies but by blood itself. Her breath came cold. You lied. I protected him, Ned said. You hid him from me. I hid him from everyone. Because power doesn't forgive innocence. Jon stood between them now. I don't want it. You have it, Bran whispered. You don't understand, Daenerys said, eyes flickering. I need that throne. Ned's eyes sharpened. Then burn mine, if it means saving the realm. No, Jon said. We don't burn each other. But the storm had already begun. Outside, the snow fell harder. Riders from Eastwatch brought news that froze blood. The wall had cracked. A great hole now gaped in the north, and from it the dead marched like smoke, silent and endless. "They'll be here in weeks," the rider gasped. "Maybe less." War rooms were drawn, maps unfurled, swords sharpened, and old enemies now stood side by side, united only by fear. The alliance was brittle. Tormund arrived with what wildlings remained. Gendry came from the south, bearing blacksmiths and obsidian. Sam brought old scrolls and broken knowledge. Arya trained endlessly in the yard, dancing with death, waiting. And still Ned sat on that cold throne. He had no crown, no scepter, just steel and purpose and silence. Jon sat across from him one night, while the torches flickered low. "You built something to last," Jon said. "I built something to fight. And if we lose?" Ned looked up. "Then they sit on ashes or snow. I don't care which. But not everyone in the alliance was made of honor," Varys whispered to Daenerys. "He's the better claim," he said. "The people love him." She didn't respond. "The North will never follow you if he's alive." Her silence was answer enough. On the ramparts, Jon walked alone, Ghost at his side. Arya appeared beside him. "She's going to kill you," she said. "I know." "Then why don't you kill her first?" "Because if I kill her, I become the thing she fears." Arya nodded, but didn't agree. Below, the forge lit once more. Ned was reforging more than a throne now. He was reforging the blades of the North. Valyrian steel, dragon glass, weapons for a war older than any crown. As the snows thickened, the new army prepared. Northmen, wildlings unsullied, Dothraki freefolk, Ironborn, Riverlanders, even some Lannisters. They gathered at the gates of Winterfell, and on the horizon, black specks began to move. The dead had arrived, and they did not care for thrones, they did not kneel, they did not burn, and they did not stop. The Great War had begun, and the frost had found its fire. Frost had found its fire. The dead made no sound. They moved like a tide of silence across the snow-covered fields, bone and rot and frost merging into a single monstrous advance. From atop the walls of Winterfell, Jon could feel the cold before he saw them. His breath fogged the air, but it wasn't the wind, it was fear. Real, ancient, suffocating. Beside him, Arya gripped her blade. She didn't blink. Behind them, the alliance waited. Ned Stark stood before the frozen throne, armor black as obsidian, his hand resting on the pommel of ice reforged. He had built this seat of power, but now it sat empty. He could not afford to sit, not now. Not when death had come to knock at Winterfell's gates. Daenerys descended from Drogon's back as snow whipped around her. Rhaegal landed beside them, wings beating like thunder. Grey Worm barked orders in High Valyrian, his unsullied forming an impenetrable wall. Dothraki screamed into the night, but even they fell silent when the horn blew once, then twice, then a third time. The dead were here. No one spoke. No one moved. Then, at the charge, it was Jon who led them. Direwolf sigils clashing with Targaryen fire. Northerners, wildlings, southern men who had never seen snow before, all standing side by side beneath the pale eye of the moon. And the dead answered with fury. Skeletons climbed the walls like spiders. Wights burst through the trenches. Viserion, the undead dragon, screamed above it all, his frostfire ripping through stone. Bran sat beneath the weirwood, eyes white, guiding crows to unseen truths. Sam fought near the crypts, blade shaking in hand. Tormund howled like a wolf, dragging 3 wights to the ground before they devoured him in a spray of blood and snow. Arya vanished into shadow. Sansa stood in the godswood. Blade clutched, whispering prayers to gods she never truly believed in. And Ned Stark. He walked into the blizzard, steel in hand. No helmet, no crown, just a man. And duty. He cut through the dead like he'd done all his life, without glory, without fury, just precision. Every swing of his sword was a sentence passed. Every fallen wight a name whispered to the gods. On the northern ridge, Daenerys saw them breach the trench. Dracarys, she screamed. Drogon's fire swept across the snow, but this fire did not hold them back. Not this time. The Night King walked through flame like it was mist. He raised his hands and the dead rose again. Daenerys locked eyes with him and saw nothing. No hate, no rage. Just cold Rhaegal dove toward the Night King, and the air cracked with dragon fire and ice. The two collided in the sky, talons tearing, wings shredding. Screams echoed across the fields. Below, Jon raced through the blood-slicked snow, eyes fixed on the godswood. On Bran, he never saw the dagger. It came from the one place he never expected, a flash of silver, a warm spray of red. He turned. Daenerys stood there, hand trembling, the blade slick with his blood. "You were never going to kneel," she whispered. "Not truly." Jon collapsed. She caught him as he fell. "You have his name, but I have his fire." Ned reached them too late. His son, his nephew, bled out beneath the snow, and Daenerys rose like a storm, fire in her eyes, blood on her hands. "He was the threat," she said. "He was family," Ned growled. "I gave up everything for that throne. I will not watch it slip through my fingers." The Night King was almost there. Bran's eyes opened. "It ends now." Arya dropped from the sky like a whisper. She plunged her blade into the Night King's chest, but he caught her. Ice cracked, steel froze, and then Ned Stark drove. Ice through the Night King's back, a roar of cold. A shatter of death, and he was gone. The army collapsed. Bones to snow, ash to silence. The long night had ended, but victory never comes clean. Daenerys fled on Drogon before they could stop her. She took flight with blood on her hands and fire in her wake. Winterfell burned behind her. Jon's body lay still, eyes frozen open. Bran sat in silence. Arya wept only once when no one watched. Ned stood before the frozen throne, now cracked, smeared with ash and blood. He didn't sit, he simply stared at it. A crown forged in snow, a kingdom paid for in blood. Smoke hung in the air like mourning. Winterfell's walls stood, but they no longer looked proud, only tired. The great hall lay dark, its windows cracked. The ice-forged throne scorched down one side. Blood still clung to its base where Jon Snow had bled for a truth he never wanted. Outside, snow mixed with ash. What had once been fire and ice was now silence. The North had won. But the victory tasted like iron. Ned Stark stood in the courtyard, his cloak heavy, his hair streaked with grey that hadn't been there before the battle. Around him, soldiers buried the dead, Tormund, Jorah, Gendry's smiths. Even Grey Worm, found with half his chest torn out, had died fighting for a realm he'd never call home. The pyres burned for days. Bran sat beneath the godswood tree, silent, unmoving. Arya wandered like a ghost, blade always on her hip, eyes sharp, heart unreachable. Sansa took to organizing the rebuilding with quiet rage, barking orders in her mother's voice. And Jon, he was gone, not in body. His body lay wrapped in stark colors in the crypt, but in future. Whatever the realm might have been under him, that path was closed. Betrayed not by enemies, but by blood, Daenerys vanished beyond the mountains. Some said she flew east. Others said she went mad and torched a city. No raven ever confirmed her fate. And Ned? He did not crown himself. The people expected it. The Northmen pledged themselves fully. The Vale sent word of loyalty. The Riverlands stood ready. Even the Reach, now leaderless, sent envoys asking for peace and stability. But Ned refused the throne he forged. He gathered the lords and ladies of the surviving houses in the same great hall where his ancestors had ruled. They stood before the throne of ice and scars, waiting for him to sit. He did not. "This was never meant to be mine," he said, voice low, but carrying. "I built it so we would never again be ruled by fear." The crowd was silent. "I forged it from the steel of the North because the Iron Throne was born of fire and conquest. This throne was born from loss, from duty, from death." He looked at Jon's empty seat. "We do not need a king," he said, a stir in the crowd. "We need a realm where no child dies for a crown, where no queen burns a city for her name, where no lie writes 1,000 deaths." He stepped away from the throne. "I will not rule, but I will serve. As protector, as steward, as a man who remembers." Arya stepped forward first. "Then who decides?" Ned looked at Bran, the boy who had lost everything. The boy who had seen everything. "Let the realm choose its own fate," Ned said. "But let it remember the price of silence." So they built something new, a council formed, not of lords alone, but of those who had bled. Tyrion, Sansa, Arya, Sam, even Davos. No crowns. No one ruler. No one throne. The throne of ice was melted down and reforged into 7 blades, one for each of the new realms chosen, a reminder that power could no longer sit in one place. The kingdoms rebuilt, slowly. Winterfell became more than a symbol of the North. It became the center of a realm reborn. Not a capital, not a court, but a forge, for law, for truth. For peace, Arya sailed west within a year, chasing what lay beyond the maps. Bran disappeared into the north, swallowed by snows and stories. Sansa ruled the north with clarity and steel. Sam wrote the history of it all, though few believed it. And Ned, he walked the walls every dawn, watching the horizon, waiting for peace to grow, waiting for the next storm. And sometimes, just sometimes, he'd find his way back to that hollow in the great hall, where the throne had once stood, where fire had kissed frost, where a Stark once dared to forge a future no one asked for. He would stand there, hand on the hilt of his sword, and whisper to the cold stone, "We remember." And in the silence the North whispered back.